All right, well, let's get into it. Guys, thank you for coming on. So we got Greg and Damen from Wild World Rescue in Bradenton, Florida, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the freaking awesome wildlife that we have. I have so many interesting questions about like what's going on currently in the wildlife because the Everglades are shrinking and there's so much cool stuff there. They just opened up pythons again where you can get them. That stuff is so cool. And you guys, basically your everyday is rescuing animals from owners like me that think that they can just take care of an animal, they get it, and then...
You have land, so, a lot of people we get these things from, they live in an apartment and they're trying to keep a big tortoise or something, so you're at least responsible in that way that you've got some land for them.
I hope so. That's the tough part, though, because they grow so quickly.
Yeah.
Like you get a sulcata, and then all of a sudden 5 years go by, and you're like, oh, this thing's huge.
That's it. I think everybody thinks that they're just kind of, cute, small when they see them at the pet store. You go to the pet store, you never see a big one for sale.
Yeah.
It's really rare that you would because most people don't want a giant one. They want the tiny one. And unfortunately, the ones that get really big are one of the cheapest ones to get. So.
Yeah, get like a Russian or something. You can kind of maintain that a little bit. So what do you guys do on your day-to-day? How do you describe your deal then?
It's a great question. And it's different for both of us and different every day.
So, I'll let Greg explain first so he's the vice president of our organization. We're a not-for-profit wildlife rescue, but we also deal with invasive species, all kinds of other stuff. But I have a different day-to-day than he has. I'll let him explain his background and what he does first, and then we'll get into me.
Our biggest focus is wildlife rescue. So day-to-day, especially with all the building going on in Florida, every day there's animals that are injured out on the highway and out on the roads and in people's backyards. So we are constantly traveling, finding those animals in distress, taking phone calls, and so on and so forth. And on the side, we're always trying to do educational things. So we've done trainings for a lot of first responders, how to handle dangerous animals like alligators, crocodiles, venomous snakes, and pythons, and all that stuff. And we try to do a lot of education for kids. So we're always trying to do outreach programs and stuff like that. Damen's different than me because I'm a full-time scientist, so I run a biotech company in Sarasota. I'm there in a lab coat, and when Damen is giving tours, if he picks up the phone and calls me and says, hey, somebody just hit a bobcat.
So move it closer. You're good. Keep talking. So someone just hit a bobcat,
I tear off my lab coat and go running, and I have a flexible enough job that it lets me do that. But I'm working that 9-to-5 job, but I still have the flexibility to jump up, run, rescue an animal, get it in my truck. And a lot of times that animal might make an iteration through 5 steps. Somebody that can pick it up and drive it somewhere else. It gets to Damen, we get it to a veterinarian, or we get it to one of the other animal rescues.
Oh, wow. So you guys are dealing with like dangerous animals in their most vulnerable state.
We do, I've literally had to like hand capture wild bobcats that have been hit by cars and stuff like that, and certain situations where you just don't have any other options. So of course I'm vaccinated for rabies, so don't try that at home. But we deal with a lot of really dangerous stuff, and we deal with a lot of really cute, small, fuzzy stuff, and pretty much anything people call us about that's injured or orphaned that needs help.
I think it's safe to say almost everything we do, don't try it at home.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. I mean, in Florida, a lot of things are trying to get you or kill you. Or
it's definitely true. But if you have a little education and understand the animals, most of them, they would rather flee than fight in most cases. And for me, I am a licensed venomous snake keeper, and though I do wildlife rescue every day, a big part of what I do is relocating snakes, getting them from people's homes. Actually, right here in this area, I get a lot of calls for a lot of venomous diamondbacks, water moccasins, coral snakes, stuff like that. And I take them out and relocate them to areas away from the public so people don't end up getting, bit, or their pets don't get bit, stuff like that. So that's a big part of what I do every day. But I do give tours of wildlife. We have a facility located at Mixon Fruit Farms in East Bradenton, where I've been for 13 years, educating the public on wildlife. And all the animals there are either permanently disabled, or they're animals that were turned over because they were seized by Florida Fish and Wildlife, things like that can't go back to the wild. And so I go through and explain why they're there and why they have to be here. But my main focus is rescuing injured animals and getting them fixed up and returned to the wild. I work closely with another wildlife hospital on Anna Maria Island. and I am a wildlife rehabber, so we get as many of those animals fixed up and put back in the wild when we can. That's our main focus, but we take in a lot of animals that need homes permanently as well.
Yeah, it's tough because we're in such a highly developing area, so we're just pushing in on their territory, and then we push in on their territory, and then we're like, well, now it's a problem for them, and then you guys have to deal with that.
Like you just said, Florida has got some dangerous animals that other states don't have, which is, again, why we're constantly trying to educate everybody. You know, people move into Florida and they move into their little manicured lawn neighborhood. They don't know what's outside the neighborhood or what might come into the neighborhood, and they don't necessarily teach their kids that. So we believe that kids should be able to identify venomous snakes versus non-venomous snakes and understand them a little bit better than, you know, in a state up north where you might not have to be quite so careful because nothing's out there to eat you.
Yeah, Long Island, we didn't really have to worry about anything. Like, if you don't get in the water, you're not going to get bit by a shark. You're pretty safe. Otherwise, it's kind of just that, maybe a snapping turtle.
Yeah, I grew up in Michigan, and you know, we have a venomous snake up there, but I never saw one. And you know, moving here, I see more wildlife in my backyard than I would see out hiking an entire day in Michigan. So, you know, we're just loaded here. And you're right about the developments. There's no question it plays a big role in forcing wildlife out of those areas. And we end up getting those calls for those animals that are scattering and going into neighborhoods where they're not familiar with, or ending up in roadways and getting hit by cars, things like that. It has a very negative impact, unfortunately.
It's tough, too, because, you know, bobcats obviously are something you want to like rehab and bring out, but like if somebody hits a coyote, is that something like where do you kind of like, you know, there's an ethical balance. You want to like help them and put them all out, but like the coyotes also are pretty bad. Like if you look at states like California, they're constantly fighting coyotes off.
No, there's definitely you know, there's some issues sometimes with that, but I kind of look at it like, you know, we used to have a lot more predators in Florida. We had, you know, red wolves, and we had, you know, a lot more Florida panthers, and eastern cougars, I believe, came down as well. And so, and a lot more bears and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, were the black bears this far down in Florida?
Yeah, we have black bears here. Their population is significantly lower than it was historically. And it already now, I mean, there was a hunt maybe like 8 years ago or something like that. They allowed a big hunt in Florida for the black bears to reduce their populations. And they are nowhere near their historic levels that they were at one point. So I kind of look at coyotes, even though they kind of moved, some were introduced here, some would have moved in naturally anyways. They kind of fill a gap a little bit of where some of those predators that we lost that are now endangered or gone, you know, they've taken up that role. Some of the coyotes are even hybridized with red wolves, and so they're, you know, remnants of that as well. And so they eat some of the animals, rodents, things like that, but there's no question then they get into a neighborhood and they're going after people's cats or their dogs and things like that. Yeah, chickens, stuff like that. So there's a negative and a positive with that, like anything, but I also look at like, can it really be controlled? I mean, there's so many of them. I mean, they're kind of here to stay. And I personally love them. We've had coyotes before. If we've ever had orphans come in, they're raised and put in captivity at wildlife facilities where they can be on display and used for educational purposes.
That makes sense.
But, you know, I believe now the FWC has a rule that you can release them if you have like it's something like a 50-acre property where the property owner gives permission, something along that lines. But
they're considered naturalized.
Yeah, naturalized because
now, which means they've filled a spot in the ecosystem and they're not going to be pushing out.
Oh, that's interesting. So FWC kind of claimed them as a different level. Than what they were. Yeah. But then the boars out on property ruin.
Oh yeah. No,
all the farmland.
And those are another one, a great example of like you know, they don't even, I don't even think keep them at bay with what they're doing right now because you know, they're just everywhere. I mean,
they're begging you to come out there and hunt them.
Yeah, like they're all over the place in Florida, and they do a lot of damage to native wildlife, and it is definitely a problem. I know a lot of people are more concerned with their property damage and stuff like that. For me, things come down to the negative impact on the native wildlife, and you know, they eat all kinds of ground animals, snakes and stuff like that in the ground that are native here and serve a purpose. So,
and even destroying crops is, you know, hard on the economy and like it's hard on the people when you have, you know, 50 boars come in and destroy a whole field.
Yeah, no question.
We're already fighting disease in a lot of like
And the boar
fields.
are one of those animals that, like, you can look around the world. They've been introduced to places all around the world, and they've successfully established themselves. And it seems like no matter how hard they try to reduce their numbers, they continue. Australia, you know, all those places.
They're just so tough.
Yeah, they are.
Even
They're
when
very
they
tough
try to
animal.
hunt them.
And I've actually rescued quite a few of them over the years, and I actually love them. They're fun to work with if you get them at a young age, but the adults are very dangerous animals to deal with sometimes.
All right up here from a girl.
Yep.
What do they
And
call that, a
I've been
swan?
tusked before by them, and it's unpleasant. I've had to wrestle quite a few of them before.
Yeah, the boars are. We just have so much invasiveness. It seems like it seems like it's a really hot ground for a lot of things to flourish that shouldn't be. And even like the pythons, I was just reading about how they're pretty much ruin the Everglades.
Yeah, you know, Florida, unlike many other states in the U.S., you know, it's warm pretty much year-round, so it allows a lot of these exotic, you know, tropical and subtropical species to survive here that wouldn't survive in states north of us. And the problem is happening everywhere in the U.S., but because Florida's warm, they survive here. And so people are releasing their pets all over, but Florida, it's become a major problem. And both Greg and I have been heavily involved in the past in removing pythons from the Everglades. We've captured a lot down there. We started doing that back around like 2010, around there. And, you know, rules got stricter and stricter, and we just didn't, you know, continue to get involved with that. But we've captured quite a few down in the Everglades.
Yeah. The real issue is that it was so much fun. We had a ton of experience with big pythons and anacondas and snakes like that. So all of a sudden to have them in your backyard, it's exciting.
I was just thinking that. I kind of want to
It
go.
was so much fun.
Yeah.
And we'd go down there, we'd catch a few, and at the time when they were first being found down there, we could microchip them and find them homes. We could send them off to zoos or collectors or the roadside attractions that wanted to put a Burmese python out on display, and they got stricter and stricter and stricter with people that wanted to do that. And since we don't want to kill anything, you know, we love snakes. I absolutely love snakes, so I really don't want to be a part of going out.
I understand that.
Yeah.
They're great animals, but it's so tough because you're in that issue where it's like, if I don't kill this snake, how many small mammals is it going to take out?
They're one of the ones that, you know, as a rescue, you know, we're all about trying to save animals, but I have nothing against people who are down there removing them and euthanizing them as well. And actually, many of the guys that are hunting them are huge snake lovers that actually work with wildlife and in wildlife rescues and stuff like that. But you have to realize at the end of the day, they're killing our native wildlife. So it's really a question of, do you kill the snake or do you let them kill our native animals? So an animal's going to die one way or another. It's just a matter of which one actually belongs here and which one doesn't. So when it comes to that stuff, not against it. It's not my thing to go out and, you know, hunt them, but I've captured a lot in the past. And like Greg said, you know, we used to be able to place them in captivity. And I think that's one of the real failures on the state's part that they haven't looked at, is that, you know, they banned taking them alive from the Everglades. And I'm not against banning them here in Florida unless you have a license for them to use them for educational purposes. But I really think exporting them out of the state for the pet trade would get a lot of people to come into the Everglades and start capturing them. It would give them an incentive to go out there and capture them if they could sell them out of state to the pet trade, because there's a huge trade for them, and people want to keep them as pets around the U.S. where it's not illegal and where they wouldn't survive if they got into the wild, you know, in one of these cold states. So I'm not against doing that, and I think that that would help a lot, but the state's gone in the opposite direction where it's just like, don't take any alive, kill them all.
At the very least, when they find
prisoners.
those 18, 19 footers that are just amazing specimens, those should kind of be able to be saved.
There's zoos that there's zoos and facilities that want them, but they've made it so strict and made it so now the law says you cannot take them alive from the Everglades. There's, you know, so it's really kind of sad to see such an amazing animal like those 19 footers that get
19
pulled.
foot is crazy.
It's just it would be a great example for something to be on display and to talk about the problem, you know.
But if somebody, you know, was to get a 12-foot snake from the Everglades that has spent its whole life out in the wild, how much of like a pet can that be? Because some people have, you know, 8-foot snakes that they raised, And they live on their shoulder and they hang out.
Sure.
But if you get some wild snake, I don't know if that's going to want to live with
majority
your
of the
dog.
pythons that are removed are actually small ones. So the big ones are the ones that make it to the news or social media and stuff like that because it's cool and it looks big. But the majority are actually small. There's a lot of nests that are rated that these guys will capture, just hatching out of the eggs, these baby pythons and stuff. So there's definitely the ones there, and even ones that have been in the wild and they're 4 or 5 feet, you can tame those down, no problem. Burmese python are pretty tameable. Yes, when they get up to those larger sizes, they're not going to tame down in most cases. But for a facility like ours or like a zoo, you don't necessarily need to be playing with it and have it on your shoulder all the time. It's more meant for exhibit and, showing, how big they get.
But there's always those stories of like, a woman sleeps with hers every single night. And like, because snakes are weird like that. There's no other animal down there that you could raise and it is going to be like a pet. Like you're not getting a gator and suddenly it's going to be like hanging out with you. That's
one of the points that we bring up a lot with people that are afraid of snakes. And, we might on a regular hike go through, and especially if we have kids with us, pick up several animals to show them and teach them and show them this or that. How many animals can you walk down into the forest and just gently pick up?
Yeah.
You pick up a cute little fuzzy bunny, it's probably still going to bite your hand.
Yeah,
right?
good luck getting one.
And they're too fast.
Squirrel,
most
it's
of the time.
so cute, it's still going to bite you.
Yeah.
As long as you handle a snake gently, they learn very quickly.
Yeah.
And how many animals can you do that with?
Even the venomous ones you guys handle pretty well. Like they're not like you can kind of hold them, keep their head away from you a little bit.
Sure.
They're not constantly trying to snap at you.
No,
so it's nice to have an animal that you can interact with on that level. And
it's weird because they're the ones that everybody's the most scared of too.
Yeah.
Like if you held like a gator and a snake, I bet you more people would shy away from the snake.
They would actually. I saw that all the time during tours. Bringing out a python, there'd be people terrified of it. And it's a big baby. I've had it forever, and it's never bit anybody or even tried. And they're terrified of it. But I bring out an alligator, and they come right to it. And they're like, "Let me hold the alligator." The alligator, even if it has tape on its mouth, it can spin its head and whack you. It can slap you with its tail, and so they can still do some damage. And, really they're the more dangerous of the two. Now, you're locked in a box with both of them, it could be equal if one's got a bad attitude. But, overall, snakes tend to tame down more. Alligators are very tameable, too, in captivity, working with them. A lot of friendly alligators if you work with them. But you're right, like taking one straight from the wild sometimes, that's not going to,
Yeah, it seems very questionable. I've always had tortoises, and they're as cool as can be. Mine act like dogs. Like
they'll walk
chickens
right over
go on
to you
top of them. Like people don't understand. They're like, oh, it's just a tortoise. I'm like, no, it's got more of a personality than some dogs.
Yeah, we're finding out more and more through studies and research that reptiles are far more intelligent than people realize, and they're a lot of fun. And there are some snakes like pythons. They're not that smart, but they are tameable. But you get to some other snakes like a king cobra. They're highly intelligent and they can learn and watch you and stuff like that. So they're very smart animals, but they're definitely dangerous. Part of being dangerous is being intelligent.
Yeah.
So
while we normally work with native wildlife, Damen and I both spent a couple of years doing extractions of venom from snakes from all around the world. So we've worked with all the mambas, taipans, most of the cobra species, king cobras and spitting cobras, and we've worked with just about everything.
Oh, wow. So like worldwide venomous snakes all over the place. And you guys probably have to you're probably somewhat part of if somebody gets bit locally, identification and that kind of stuff, like what bit you, the anti-venom and that kind of stuff.
But a lot of times help has to be so fast that the way we've helped the most, I think, is like with our training classes. And our local sheriffs, they want those classes because sheriffs and FWC officers, they're out there in the wild very quickly, and a lot of them are hired and they're given a snake stick and a bucket and some tools and say, here you go, if there's ever a diamondback, they don't know diamondbacks. And we do. So we've had a lot of classes where we bring out all the native snakes and then the venomous ones, and we actually let them do some hands-on and get the experience so that when they go into somebody's house because there's a dangerous situation, it's not just immediately being put on the spot with something that can kill you. It's hey, I've done this before, and you pick it up with a hook and you can put it in the bag. And
I get texts and calls frequently for identifications, not just from the regular public, but from veterinarians sometimes, because they get a lot of dogs that come in that are bit, and they bring a snake. The people bring the snake with them or a photo of it. They send it to me. What is it? And then Sheriff's Department, FWC texts me a lot for photos for identification of snakes and other animals, stuff like that. But yeah, no, we worked for years in the venomous extraction facility, and we have experience with the snakes from around the world. And that made life so much easier for me handling the snakes we have here in Florida, because people look at these snakes as dangerous, but once you've worked with some like a
9-foot black mambas,
yeah, forest cobras, stuff like that, it makes it a lot easier handling this stuff. Now, you should never let your guard down, obviously, but half the battle is just understanding the behavior of the snakes and realizing how they're going to respond to everything you do. And then once you get that down pat, it's really easy to handle them. I don't look at it as avoiding the overall snake. I look at it as avoiding the fangs. That's the only thing you got to avoid. So if you just focus on that and realize that's the only part you got to worry about, the rest is pretty easy.
I had an electrician in my lab a few months ago, and he was doing running some 220 voltage lines live. And as he's doing it, he's got the wire in his hand, and he's leaning over, and he's like, "I can't believe you work with those dangerous snakes."
Yeah.
I said, "It's exactly what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
You're holding a 220 volt line.
Yep.
It's live, but you know what you're doing."
Yeah.
Right?
That's
so
what
Damen and I
it
worked
comes down to.
with giant, we had 14-foot king cobras that we were working with daily, that we had to realign their nasal bones every day and flush them out and stuff. They don't like that. A snake doesn't like to have stuff flushed into its nose. And a 14-foot king cobra, when it comes out of its cage, its head is up here, right? And it's that big around. You get to a point of comfort where it's really no scarier than working with a regular snake, because we know what to do.
There's some snakes that still terrify me. Like, I've worked with venomous snakes my entire adult life, and there's still a few that terrify me to work with. I sweat bullets, and if you don't, something's wrong with you.
They all worry me. Like, when I'm walking somewhere, I'm like, I'd rather a gator pop out and potentially bite my leg or something than something that's venomous, because you don't know how quick that's going to really set in. And then there's a whole mystery of you got to race time. If you're bleeding, you're not really...
So our
kind of tourniquet your leg or something, but if you got venom, I don't know.
If you get bit by one of our native venomous snakes, you're probably going to be fine, unless you're really elderly or you're a really small child, or if you just have an allergic reaction to it. Obviously, go into shock. But most of our hospitals do carry Crofab, the anti-venom that you can use for the viper species that we have here in Florida. The only one, would take more time is the coral snake, which we have locally. Those are very unlikely to bite you. Even if you were handling them in your hand, in most cases they're not. But if they do, it's a neurotoxic venom, and you're going to need anti-venom. And the closest place that probably has it, I think, is probably Venom 1 down in Miami. Right. Maybe Orlando at the Serpentarium.
So they'd have
there.
to airlift you.
Yeah, they'll fly the anti-venom here. You just get to a hospital. As long as you get to the hospital, they can probably keep you alive. It takes a while for that venom to set in, and they can probably keep you alive in the hospital.
Keep you alive.
And until the anti-venom arrives, they can get off the ground in 15 minutes in the helicopter and be here probably in less than 2 hours with the anti-venom for that. So your chances are really good. There's only been, I think, 2 or 3 deaths in the eastern U.S. in the last 70 years related to coral snake bites, and there's probably been dozens and dozens of bites. So, your chances are pretty good of survival these days, especially venomous snakes, too. The last time we had somebody unfortunately pass away in Manatee County was a child, and that was in, I think, 2000 or 2001. And he was bit by a diamondback right here in Lakewood Ranch. And
perfect.
And and this is where I get most of my diamondback calls. And and it was really unfortunate. And he was a young kid, and it was more due to poor treatment at the hospital than it was the snake. Obviously, snake bite is what led to it, but the poor treatment at the hospital
So
is
just
from
uneducation.
Yeah,
with the doctors and
now
nurses.
I think a lot of doctors have got more educated on it. But I'll tell you what: if you get bit by a venomous snake, don't rely entirely on the doctor. Call the Venom 1 unit down in Miami-Dade's Venom 1 unit, because they have experts on hand that will be able to tell the doctors how to treat this snake bite, and they'll save you a lot of potential trauma, doing fasciotomies and stuff like that aren't necessary, which is cutting open your arm and stuff like that. you want to get in touch with them.
Are you going to lose a limb likely if you get bit by one? Like if, one gets my leg and it's not going to kind of infect everything.
I mean, if you did nothing and just let it happen, yeah. But, in most cases now, you might have some permanent damage, muscle damage or something like that, or tissue damage. But now if you get bit in the pinky or one of your fingers, you might lose an end of your finger or something like that. But in most cases nowadays, if you seek treatment pretty quick, you're probably going to make either a full recovery or just have, mild issues with wherever the bite was permanently. You might have some issues with that. So I know quite a few people that have been bitten by venomous snakes from around the world, including a lot of our native snakes here. And most of them, have full function of whatever extremity that they were bit. So,
that's good. Most
so
of them.
You're okay for for the most part.
There you go, Florida tourism.
Yeah, no, you might
go
survive.
visit the Everglades. It's beautiful down there.
No, there's no question we have tons of dangerous animals here, but we do education for a reason, because if you just educate yourself a little bit on those animals, you can learn how to avoid them and live with them without having to worry about that. Most snake bites come from people walking barefoot in their yards and stuff like that at night or in the evening when snakes are active moving around. They're not paying attention. So always wear foot coverage when you're in your yard, especially in the evening when you can't see what's going on, and bring a flashlight. If you don't cover your feet, that's where most snake bites happen, people walking through your yard.
And when we teach classes, it's not just the stuff that could kill you. I mean, especially with kids, we reach out and we teach the stuff that what Florida plants and flowers are toxic and could poison their kids or their animals, and what insects are kind of dangerous. None of them are going to kill you, but the striped stick insects are going to spray some venom in your face, and it could cause temporary blindness and need to be washed out. There's a lot of insects that bite really hard that people don't know about. We've got a bunch of stinging caterpillars that if you just touch them, you end up stung.
I was going to ask about it. Isn't it the puss, right? They call it?
The puss caterpillar is one of them, and it looks like Donald Trump's hair. And it's so beautiful, and you want to reach out and pet it, and kids love to touch things, right? You just find a caterpillar, and oh man, it's so cute. Yeah. They're going to get stung.
That's
and you don't want to raise your kids scared of it.
No, you don't.
I have a son on the way, and I don't want him to be scared of every animal that he comes across.
Right, so teach them what they can and can't do.
Kids are so much smarter than people give them credit for. If you teach them from a young age about these animals, they will learn and they'll understand what's dangerous, and, give them a mission. Tell them to, I really want to know about this animal. If you see one, tell dad about it, tell mom about it. If you see one, they're really cool, but we don't want to touch them, and stuff like that. Kids learn quick, and they realize what's dangerous and what's not. So the biggest difference, we have other countries where people die all the time from snake bites and from crocodile attacks, and that's because there's not as much education done on it in some of those countries, and people are also forced to go into some of those water sources that wouldn't necessarily have to. But the biggest difference here in the United States, we do heavy education on alligators. We put signs everywhere. And so people see an alligator death here or there in Florida, and they think, oh my God, the alligators are dangerous. But we actually only have about 1 to 2 deaths in the United States every year related to alligators. There are 1.5 million alligators at least in Florida, millions more throughout the Southeast. That's a tiny number of deaths for how many alligators and how many people cross paths with each other. Now, that doesn't mean there's not a lot of attacks every year. There's people bitten, losing arms and legs every year, but the chances of you dying here are very unlikely because of a lot of heavy education on alligators and the dangers of them, and then also signage everywhere that they just don't have in some of the more,
got more shark attacks than that. Mm-hmm. More shark attacks than gator attacks, for
there
sure.
Is, and so, and a lot of it, when you start to look at these alligator attacks and, what happened, 90% of the time it's human error, people doing things that they just shouldn't have been doing. A lot of them are literally deaths of people jumping into waters that had signs warning them there were alligators there. And even I know in one case, the guy said, F the alligators, and jumped in, and he was killed almost immediately when he jumped in.
And the bear on that one.
Yeah. So now there's very few cases where people were just, la-di-da, and it flies out and attacks them. They just weren't paying attention. There was one not too long ago, the woman walking her dog in North Florida.
Yeah,
and,
Disney had a very famous one as well.
Yeah, and that one was really sad. There wasn't warning signs for the alligators there. There were no swimming signs, and I think the people were from out of state, and they said they admitted that they just didn't realize that alligators were in all the waters. and it was
much
kind of
guaranteed in Florida.
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter if it's a resort like Disney or something. There are alligators. They can climb 5-6 foot high chain link fences. They can swim through a storm drain and hold their breath for a long time to get through one side to the other. So you can, and that's one of the big things I always tell people too. People are always like, if I see an alligator in the community in the pond, let's call FWC or Sheriff's Department and have it removed. You're no safer when you remove that alligator than you were when it was there. It's almost better that you know it's there than to not, because now you think it's safer and that you might be able to go close to the edge of the water or get in the water. And now most alligators want nothing to do with you. They're afraid of you. But every once in a while, there's that one that somebody's been feeding, or it's got babies around and it's a mother being protective.
Right after that toddler was killed in Disney years ago, we were doing a training. We were teaching camp counselors from the Dream Oaks camp up on the Manatee River. We had 30 or 40 camp counselors, each of which was responsible for a group of kids right on the river. And a lot of them were out-of-state counselors, and they had no training. They didn't understand. They were asking us questions about snakes that we thought were really simple. So,
yeah, like, you should know this.
Yeah, you should know this.
Yeah.
And you know, out-of-staters don't necessarily know that just because you don't see the alligator there doesn't mean that the alligator.
And they're fast on land too. Once they actually get on land, they're not slow. Like, a shark's easy. You get out of the water, you're safe. A gator will actually come from in the water too, which is even crazier when you see them from the salt water or from like the Gulf. They swim up on the land, and that's
to us that's easy
because
we also work with big crocodiles of different species, and we've had crocodiles, Nile crocodiles and Cuban crocodiles, and I think moralettes also that have chased us in and out of trees, chased us around things.
Yeah, if you've ever heard the
whole time,
the zigzag thing, if you've ever heard running in a zigzag, that's not true for everybody that's listening or watching. If an alligator or crocodile chases you, run straight as fast as possible. If you can jump up, climb up something, they're clumsy and slow climbers, and they're not going to be able to climb up a tree or on top of a car. So do not run zigzag. They'll run straight through your zigzag pattern and catch you even faster. You're going to trip and fall running back and forth. So, they're quick on land.
Get in a car or something.
Yeah,
get inside a vehicle.
Yeah, if you
maybe.
can do anything to, just avoid that. But, my big thing is always telling people, keep a buffer between you and the water, murky waters where you can't see what's going on, because, they can hold their breath in some cases for an hour or so, and they can sit there underwater just watching you, and you never see them there. And then they just wait for that right moment. And I know from working with my own crocodiles that I have that every time I turn and look away, they move a little bit closer. And then you look back and they sit there still, and then you turn away and they move a little closer. They know exactly when you're not watching them, and they'll take advantage of that. If you have dogs or small children, extra careful around the edges of fresh waters in Florida, brackish waters too. You want to give yourself a very big buffer zone. They see dogs as prey, and if a dog's barking around their pond, a big male's going to say, this is my pond, and I'm going to let you know about that. So he'll come over and kill the dog just to let it know that this is his pond and his territory.
My stupid golden retrievers will go up and try to play with it.
Yeah,
they'll be like, what's this? I'm going to go swim and play with it.
Yeah, they don't know any better. So it's really your responsibility as a pet owner to keep your dogs on a leash and keep them extra far away from fresh water sources. And if you have it on your property, build a fence, or in some cases, if it's being aggressive, you're going to have it removed or relocated depending on how big it is. So
yeah, I have a couple friends that have had to get them removed from then, and then they get it removed, like somebody will come with a fishing rod and try to get it like that, and then they'll end up eating it half the time because a lot of people like to eat them, which is actually pretty interesting because both the snakes and the gators are eaten. So there is kind of like a use case, at least. You're not just like killing to kill it. You can actually use it, which I like to see animals get used. It'd be cool if the boars could kind of be in the same boat.
Yeah, I heard that somebody was starting to do more of that with them, but, I don't know that that's nearly as big as something like alligators or so. Pythons, I'm sure that there's a lot of people that wouldn't want anything to do with eating that, but, there is people that do, and it's on some menus here and there and some odd restaurants here and there, but, definitely those are used for that and that purpose. Now, I always find it cool down in the Everglades, not cool necessarily, but very interesting that, those are two apex predators and from the other side of the world that are meeting each other in the Everglades. And it's a very interesting thing to see that, to see them compete and fight with each other down there. And there's documented many videos of them, fighting with each other, in some cases for hours, rolling around and fighting with each other out there. So it's really neat to see that, but obviously very bad for the Everglades.
Yeah, but I mean, if they both end up taking each other out that helps the mammal species and the birds and the fish and
it does
things
and,
like that. It kind of needed a little bit.
And makes for great movies.
The alligator,
TV.
like if an alligator is like over 7 to 8 feet, they're at very little risk of a python killing them. It's all those little alligators that are the ones at risk, so it could eventually play more of a role in damaging their, The good thing is the pythons, I don't think they'll ever move much further north from where they're at right now. They're going to stay kind of where they are. We haven't seen them move a whole lot from where they are, but it's going to damage South Florida significantly if they continue to.
But even as they exhaust their food source, they're not going to just keep inching up because they're kind of taking out, from what I've seen, all the mammals and all the small animals and like.
It's not necessarily just the food, though, because it comes down to temperatures as well. And they get upper respiratory infections really easily, and their eggs can't do as well in the cooler temperatures because it gets significantly cooler for weeks at a time in this area of Florida versus down in the Everglades. And so it's just that right place for them to thrive and do very well. So I just don't see them because we've had pythons. I mean, I get calls for pythons and other exotic snakes all the time in this area, not just, Burmese pythons. I actually just Burmese python in Palmetto there. I just had a call for one a couple weeks ago. It's in a ditch. Guy took a clear photo of it and showed me. It's maybe an 8-foot python in a ditch in Palmetto. And I told Fish and Wildlife, and I went out searching. Greg and I went out searching for it together, and we couldn't find it. It had been a day since the guy had seen it. And so, we find them occasionally loose up here, but we haven't seen any establish themselves and take hold. And I just don't see it happening just because it gets too cool up here. You see a lot of stuff on the History Channel, the news. They're like, they're going to be in, the northern United States by 2040 or something like that. And it's just not going to happen. It's
the
just
iguanas have been down there for years, and we don't get them up here. We don't get coconuts up here. It's weird how there's like this one line right kind of on the Everglades where things are different in South Florida. I consider it a different state anyways because South Florida is kind of is lawless down there.
Yeah, it is. It's a different place, especially the Miami area and Homestead. And
Florida could be 3 different states, like the Panhandle area, the Central, and South.
Yeah, it definitely is a totally different place down in Miami specifically, and that whole region around it. It's a lot of fun. And we spent years going to the Everglades and capturing pythons, chameleons, all kinds of different stuff that you can find down there. There's like no end to the exotic animals that you can find down in the Everglades. People tend to focus on the Burmese python because they get big and it makes for good news, but there's an amazing amount of different exotic species that are loose in South Florida. Not just there, we find a lot of exotics all the way up here that have actually established themselves. Tegu lizards, spiny-tailed iguanas, the green iguana, all these different species that have continued to expand and grow in numbers. They're a little hardier species that can withstand cooler temperatures than the Burmese python. So people focus on it, but it's not our only problem. We got, and of course, pigs, like you said.
The pigs, those worry me because they're kind of pack animals. Same with the coyotes, because the coyotes are smart. They'll be quiet when they have to be.
They are highly
And then they start whimpering, and you're like, is that a child out there? Like, we've heard them back here.
Let me go out and look.
Yeah, we got like power lines back behind my house, and like you'll hear them sometimes, and like my wife's like, that's like scary. It sounds
I hear
like
them howling every night out in Mayaca. I'm sure he does too.
I bet.
And we hear big groups of them howling out there. I don't ever see them on my property, pretty amazingly, because I butt right up to some heavily wooded area, but I never see coyotes. I see bobcats and all the other stuff, but yet to have seen a coyote on my actual property out there. I see them in town more than I do out there. So I think it's just more land out there for them to run, and in town you're going to run into them here.
I've seen some crazy videos too of some like big crocodiles like wading around in like some actual like in like the Keys, like in the water at the Keys, and that's scary.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that the Keys has American crocodiles. Typically the American crocodiles can get up to like 17, 18 feet. Typically those are bigger bloodlines like down in Central America, Southern Central America, stuff like that in Jamaica. But here in South Florida, I mean, like, you see a 16-footer or something like that, but a really big one. But people are shocked. They don't realize they're in the Keys, and they'll be there vacationing, and one will just walk right up on the beach or into people's backyards even and sit there next to their pool and stuff. And they're a protected species. There's not that many of them. Where their most northern population is in the southern tip of Florida. So you can find them from the Keys, wrapping around in both directions of the southern tip of Florida up to like Fort Myers and over the other side, same north of Fort Lauderdale. But most of them are down in.
And they're
Key
a little
Largo.
more aggressive, a little bit more likely to kind of snap at something.
Crocodiles overall are, but the American crocodile is not.
Okay.
They're kind of same as.
It's not like having saltwater crocodiles from
No,
Australia.
some crocodiles
Nile
are
crocodiles.
definitely way more aggressive than alligators. But I would put alligators and American crocodiles kind of at the same level as they're, the big difference is that there's maybe 20,000 American crocodiles versus 1.5 million American alligators. So there's 0 deaths on record that I know of linked to an American crocodile in South Florida. There's been bites, but there's been no deaths that I know of. But there's only 20,000, and they're mostly in very rural areas of South Florida. So if they were as many as the American alligator, there'd probably be the same amount of deaths or bites and
But
attacks.
the American crocodile, they're eating mullet.
Yeah, they eat pretty
they're
small.
They're designed to eat fish and stuff. They're not designed
wading
to
birds, stuff like
drag
that.
a zebra down into the...
They do attack
river.
people's dogs and stuff in the Keys sometimes. They'll go
Yeah.
after dogs and stuff like that. There's one that for a while has been down there. They relocated it somewhere pretty far the last time they did, but it had attacked. Well, actually, the dog swam across the canal to the crocodile, and it got attacked when it did that. And so,
There was a dog death this week.
yeah. Oh, was there? I didn't
Man,
think I saw that.
that's tough. I've been lucky enough to go to Australia and see some of their captive crocodiles,
Huge.
and they're big.
Yeah, they're the biggest. The saltwater or
Got nothing
estuarian,
on that.
they can grow to a maximum of 21, 22 feet and over 2,000 pounds. So they get huge. And I've worked with some saltwater but smaller ones, and they have horrible attitudes. And they're known man-eaters in Australia because they get big enough to see humans as prey, And here in Florida, the alligator, their diet is turtles, fish, and wading birds for the most part. They might occasionally go after a bigger animal, but they almost have to be trained to see humans as food. And that's why, feeding them is so illegal and you get in trouble for it because you're teaching them you are food. And, they didn't know that necessarily before. So, but no, saltwater crocodiles, crazy compared
And
to
we're
our-
not, for several reasons, we're not trappers. We're not alligator trappers.
do rescue injured alligators, but
We've been pulled in by the croc docs that manage the American crocodiles down there in the glades to help them capture some, do radio tag labeling and some DNA analysis for them. And we've been brought in by a lot of facilities that have big crocodiles and alligators, and they just want them moved or they want to clean an enclosure. They call us in, and we've gone in and, Everglades Outpost, Everglades Alligator Farm, we go in, we raid the nests. We go in and we capture and move. They had a lake down there. And it sounds like you're in a zoo, but it's a fenced-in lake. And I think we captured 9 Nile crocodiles out of that one.
Nile.
Yep. And recently, so we've had to move a lot of alligators for FWC when they raid illegal alligator farms. Our record was we captured alive and transported and re-released 49 alligators in a day. Wow. That was our record. We had one where we did 19 in a day.
but they were all like 10 foot plus. One was like 13 feet,
Yeah.
and
They were
talking
all
like 700 pounds.
enormous.
So it took our entire teams just to move
Got
one.
forklift for it.
And you're
so I
walking
wish.
through the water up to your waist, feeling for an alligator.
I have video of me. We were like noodling like you do for catfish.
Yeah.
We're in this nasty pond in stagnant water, walking around up to our waist and chest, and we got to the point where it was hard because they knew we were trying to capture them, so they're all staying deep under and sliding around, and so. We were feeling around, and I was trying to grab for a tail, and there's a video of me. I reached down to grab the tail, and I thought I grabbed the tail, and I actually grabbed it right by the front of its jaws and pulled it out of the water, and
Lifted it right up to his
and I
face.
did, and I told them to grab the noose. I was holding on to it. And they grabbed the noose and noosed it quick out of my hand, and we dragged it out. It was like a 10-foot alligator, maybe 9.
Holy crap!
something like
and they'll
that,
just
so.
drown you if that's
Yeah, if they
kind
could-
of their move is just to drown or
pull
roll
you
a
in,
person.
Yeah, death roll you and like just disorient you and drown
But when you
you,
have to
basically.
capture that many, our whole idea was we feel them with our feet. One person goes down underwater.
If you're gentle with them, it
And
works
you
a lot
can
easier.
gently, slowly lift an alligator that weighs hundreds of pounds
Yeah.
on land. In the water, you can gently and slowly lift that monster up right to the surface. Then you have a couple split seconds before he erupts. So in that little moment that we bring him up to the surface,
Yeah.
the other one has to jump in and get a noose around its neck.
Do you do anything
jump
first?
back
Like, do you
off.
heavily feed them or something to try to get them, like, maybe
Most cases,
calm
we
a
don't have the
little?
ability to when we come to these types of situations because we have a certain amount of time we're allowed to be there and get there. Right. And actually, we typically don't feed at all. We don't want them to feed. We want them to be hungry because you can bait them sometimes, put a piece of chicken on a string just to get them to hold on to something and pull them up. And, when you pull them up, noose them. And so, keep them hungry if you can, if you're trying to capture them. But it can be difficult because sometimes they'll have tunnels that go under the edges of the, banks and stuff. And they go in there and it's a lost cause unless you're willing to swim inside the tunnel, which we've had some guys do that.
Well, it was funny because in 2000, probably 9 or 10, it became mainstream where there was Gator Boys on TV. Was every TV across the country was watching that at the time. And it was Florida Everglades were or wherever they were.
They were down there, just outside of Miami.
Yeah, because that was a big show at the time. And it's kind of funny. There was a
those guys are the real deal. They know what they're doing. Chris Gillette, Paul, and can't think of his name right now, but they absolutely know what they're doing, and it's very realistic to the lifestyle down there of a lot of those people, and we know a lot of those people down there that live that lifestyle, and it wasn't just for TV. That's how they live every day down there, catching alligators and crocodiles and snakes and anything else they can find.
Not fake.
No, it's not at all. We've done a lot of it ourselves down there, and that's just kind of that Florida man lifestyle down there, So,
yeah, that's funny that it's because a lot of the times you see that and you're they planted that stuff there.
There might be some stuff occasionally planted, but I'm telling you, South Florida, I've had people film with me before, film crews come from places, and they're like, we're going to schedule to do this here, this here. It's I'm telling you, you don't need to. We can find enough interesting things without having to plant a snake or something like that. And it always works out. There's enough animals down here that you can find something to do. So
yeah, that's interesting. That always worried me is the crocodiles, because I've seen them in Australia, and I think, crocodile, it's a 28-foot long killing machine. That
I've seen Lake Placid. I know those things can do.
Yeah, exactly. But the one that I saw in captivity when I was it was Sydney Zoo in Australia. This thing was massive, and we were lucky. We got behind the scenes feeding of it, and got to hold the thing, and it jumped to where its tail was the only thing touching, and I was, man, this thing is not just some 800-pound immobile item. He's probably 1,000-pound.
If we had those in Florida instead of the alligator, people would be dying every week. I mean, they're definitely a much more fierce and aggressive species of crocodile, and but it still comes down to just, you got to have some common sense around the waters, and a lot of deaths there that happen, it's in no swimming areas because of crocodiles. They have signs there. And, they're fast. Those things are so fast. And the power in those jaws, I think the highest tested pressure in one of their jaws, and it wasn't even full grown, was 36 or 3,700 pounds of pressure per square inch. So, I mean, you're talking cars dropping on you with teeth, and, that's an amazing force. And that's just the bite. The thrashing, they can literally grab a human and just tear them in half by thrashing with that amount of power in their neck and stuff like that. So it is a killing machine that's evolved for millions of years or hundreds of thousands, and it's that's what it's designed for. So but they are not stupid animals, and I prove this all the time with my crocodile. I have a 9-foot West African crocodile. I actually have a new one, female, being introduced next week. And my crocodile Ra is quite well known because he's so friendly and laid back. Now, when it comes to feeding time, he turns into a different animal sometimes. If he's hungry, he'll run out chasing me, jumping through the air, clapping his jaws. But I can also sit on his back. I can pet him right on the top of his head, on his eyes, and right along his snout. And I've had him for, 10 years? And
10 years ago, he wasn't like that. 10 years ago, he wanted to kill us.
We pulled him out of a pond, and he was totally wild. And at the time, we had taken in 8 other crocodiles, and he stood out to me out of the group as being slightly less aggressive. He was more passive and didn't want to fight. And so I took him, and I spent more time working with him. And they're highly intelligent. They have long-term memory. You can teach them voice and hand commands and all kinds of stuff. But at the end of the day, they're still a very dangerous animal. And if you make a mistake around them, you can easily lose a hand or an arm. And, but if you look also, people are always like, you're going to die doing that. You're going to die doing that. I, as a crocodile keeper and somebody who works with them, can't name a single person that works with them in captivity that's actually been killed in the United States working with crocodiles.
Yeah, it's always some older person walking their dog or
exactly.
something.
So, the people that work with them, not at risk. A lot of times they're so well fed in captivity, even if they do attack you, they don't have the motivation to totally tear you apart and eat you, because, it's more just about dominance or, just because they mistook your hand for food or something like that.
I'm gonna pause you for 1 second. I gotta pee. It's been dry this year too.
Yeah, it has. It's really sucked. Well, it's good and bad because that humidity does add an extra heat feel to it, and but. Either way, this summer has been the worst summer of my time doing tours with people. I get so many, it's just too hot out, and people are they don't want to stay for the entire thing and see all the animals because it's just too hot to sit out in that. So
yeah, that makes sense. Even if you're on a farm with some nice trees and stuff,
we got
it's still
shade
just
and we got some
much.
fans, and they're just it's got to get back on the train.
Yeah, I know. I got a pregnant wife right now, and she's like, I don't want to do anything outside.
No,
I'm like, all right, let's sit here and watch TV.
Yeah, I just had a daughter and my wife, and we can't go outside in the daytime. She's 6 months old, and it's just too hot. So, and then you go out in the evening, and out in Mayaca, it's swarmed by mosquitoes everywhere as soon as you step outside, and it's I don't need that.
So
either.
you guys are pretty close with FWC then. I've been to the dump over here quite a few times, and there's always bald eagles there.
I've released quite a few there myself.
If one, just happened to want to stay at my house, would they be mad? If suddenly there was just a bald eagle that was living in your treetop or something, would they be like, no, it has to be at the dump?
No, they don't control that at all. And actually,
if one accidentally made it here, and I didn't keep it in a cage or anything, it just there was some fish and stuff
the
around.
dump has a unique spot where there's a big hillside. And we had permission, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, we had permission to go in there to do a release. And we actually had to climb the fence after hours, hand a bald eagle over the fence. I had to climb up halfway, hand a bald eagle over to Damen. And we went up onto that hillside, unwrapped it, and that's a great hill to do a flight check to make sure that it swooped down and off it.
I always get a kick out of it because people are like, "Oh man, I saw a bald eagle up in the Pacific Northwest or something." And I'm like, "Yeah, you just
30 of them here.
You go spend $10, dump off some trash, and you can take the photos and videos you want. There's plenty of food for them."
Every time photographers ask me, where can I get a picture of bald eagle, I say the dump, and they think I'm joking. I'm like, no, the dump's the best place. Every county along the coastline that has a dump has eagles all over the place. There's tons of rats because there's trash and there's usually ponds there with fish, and it's just a great place for them. But no, if you're feeding the eagles to try and get them to stay at your property, FWC might take issue with that, but you're not going to just attract eagles anyways. You'll end up with every animal in the neighborhood coming over to your house. But
I'm okay with that.
No, yeah. No, if an eagle just makes a home at your house and hangs out there, there's nothing against that. And, eagles now, there's a lot more of them than there used to be. When I started working with wildlife back in 2004, they were still on the endangered species list. They're now still protected. But they're not endangered. And the first bald eagle I rescued they were still on the endangered list. And then after that, it switched over. So I always like to note that I helped get them off the endangered species list. That was my one rescue.
Single-handedly.
Yeah. For it. No, but
round of applause for that.
Yeah, no, I've rescued probably 40 or 50 bald eagles now over the years, and
cool.
It never is not exciting to get that call. They're such a magnificent bird when you see them. They're so much bigger in person when you get close to them. So a lot of them are juveniles that I get calls for, but I get quite a few adults over the years, and they're just so cool. And it's nothing like rescuing that and getting a photo holding a bald eagle.
Because of car collisions,
America,
we get a lot of eagles, a lot of hawks, and a lot of owls.
Okay.
All the time.
Those are actually my most common calls. Is owls. I get a lot of late night calls for owls out in Mayaca. People hit them while they're driving.
One thing that I have found fascinating is, all these birds have hollow bones, right? We've had some of these raptors with broken wings where it looks like you took a drumstick and you snapped it in half, and this broken bone sticking out like this. And Damen and I stick them together, wash them with saline, wrap it up. And then a few weeks later, we're throwing that bird up in the sky and it's flying away.
Wow, so they're really that good.
Literally amazing how
bouncing
quickly
back.
those bones mend.
Yeah, birds' bones heal very fast compared to mammals' bones, so it takes
no density
weeks.
really. Yeah,
so just that our side, and so we've successfully released a lot of back to the wild over the years. When I worked with, I still am part of Wildlife Inc., which is another wildlife rescue and rehab facility, and we've rehabbed many over the years and been able to release them back to the wild. But unfortunately, every once in a while you get one that can't make it, and so we do our best to find them homes in captivity.
So I have a weird one then. I have a really good friend that owns the racetrack out in Bradenton, the Freedom Factory.
Yeah. Definitely know of it.
How can it become a place where there may be some bald eagles? If it could be set up somehow with...
So there would be a couple things that you'd want to do. One is get some ponds and stock them with fish. I mean, fish are a big part of their diet, and they love them. Same with rabbits. They love rabbits as well, and there's tons of rabbits probably out there.
They reproduce real quick.
Yeah.
Build a nesting platform.
Yeah, nesting platforms you can build out there, and I would say try and do them closer to trees and stuff like that, so they feel like they're right there near the trees. You might end up getting a lot of osprey too. You're not far from Lake Manatee there, and so there's eagles already out there. I've released eagles many times out at Lake Manatee as well, and so it wouldn't take much to entice some bald eagles.
That would be really cool.
It would be cool, yeah.
It would be a benefit for the eagles, the local wildlife, and then also it would just be a really cool, you could go there and see an eagle that's living.
You should maybe, you said you know them, you should maybe consider getting a falconer to come out and fly an eagle there, because some falconers do keep eagles. And just for like the beginning of a show or something like that, where you guys are doing a race, before all the loud noises and all that, just have them come out and fly one just for everybody to see. And
we had one once for an event, but it was very skittish. It was a little like...
Yeah, it depends on whether they've been raised from a young age and stuff. Yeah, so, and the falconry ones that can still fly, that's kind of cool because they can get out there and fly. But yeah, I've worked with quite a few in captivity, and some of them are really calm, some of them are just really jumpy, just depending on how old they were when they came in and things like that. So.
Every time we talk about bald eagles, there's going to be the obligatory Australian that comments telling me how much better his birds are in Australia than ours.
They do have a lot of really cool birds there. They have all kinds of cool.
They got all the cool wildlife for sure.
They do, the most dangerous wildlife in the world, and there's no question they got cool stuff. But the bald eagle is just a really cool bird. I mean, it's just iconic, and that white head, and it just, to me, not a lot beats it. Maybe like Philippine eagles or, Stellar sea eagles, some of the other ones out there.
We got a lot of the, I think they're the Cooper Hawks around here. Yeah. They're really good looking birds. And they swoop down constantly and stuff like in front of my car. Yeah.
Yeah. Red shoulders are the most common one you see. Those are the ones that are really talkative. They're always screaming about something. Those are the ones I get called to rescue most. A lot hit by cars. Cooper's hawks, sharp-shinned hawks. We get all kinds of different stuff, and we have few different owl species in this area.
I've had an owl one morning. I walk out, it was up in the tree, kind of just looking at me. I could tell this thing was way smarter than anything else has been in my yard, because he's just kind of watching me, turning his head, very quiet, didn't fly away, nothing
They know that they're camouflaged too, and in most cases, most people just don't notice them, so they just sit quietly watching you and think they'll never see me. And they are almost completely silent when they fly too, so you don't even hear them when they take off and fly away or anything like that. So they're a really cool animal. I've worked in this area. We have burrowing owls, barred owls, great horned owls, eastern screech owls, and barn owls. I'm forgetting them. So I've rescued all of those. We get almost every species every year. The burrowing owl isn't as common in this area, but I usually get one every other year or so, rescue call for one of those, and they're really cool.
Such a cool species. I love how much wildlife we have in Florida. One of the other ones that always scare me, though, for waterways is those big... The alligator tortoises is what they call them, the snapping turtles that are the head is this big and their mouth can bite a watermelon. Those ones freak me out a little bit more.
Our true alligator snapping turtles are found in North Florida. We do have snapping turtles in South Florida. They get big. They can get 50 pounds or so. They get huge. Those are the common ones. But the alligator snapping turtle, we have a friend, Robbie Kesey, from the Swamp Brothers TV show. I don't know if you remember that. It was on for a long time. Really cool guy, but he's got one it's got to be 150 pounds. Or something
he says 170.
Yeah, so 170. We have pictures holding it, and you have to rest it on your leg while you're holding it because it's just so heavy. Its shell's this big. You're holding it like this. The head on that thing is that big. I mean, it's huge. And whatever. And but no problem. No sweat. But I mean, it's an amazing animal. You can find them now up, and they're finding more in the Suwannee River and some places a little more south than they initially thought their range was. And those are a protected species. Here in Florida, you have to get a license to have one as a pet. And but I've had them before. We've had them rescued because people have brought them from North Florida. They found one in a road or something and brought them all the way down to South Florida. But then you got to take them all the way back up north to release them when they need to be released back to
Interesting.
The wild.
So they do a little bit colder of a climate then?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, you can actually see them. There's videos of them swimming under the ice up in what is it, Louisiana and stuff.
Oh wow,
like
they
that.
make it pretty far then.
So,
huh. But that's pretty crazy.
They're really cool, but the snapping turtles in general can all survive, but in cold temperatures. But the alligator snapping turtle is the largest freshwater turtle we have in the United United States, and they can get over 200 pounds. They get huge, and they live a very long time.
It's a big animal.
Yeah, it is. They're awesome, and they have a major, powerful bite on them, so they can do some real
They
damage.
look more prehistoric than even gators do.
They do, yeah. They look like an animal that shouldn't exist now.
Yeah, because they have that front fang that kind of is just they're a
Yeah.
menacing looking animal. They get algae built up on them that
Yeah.
make them look like they're 1,000 years old.
They're cool, and they're pretty easy to handle, though. If you hold them in the right way, that it's physically impossible for them to bite you or anything. So, once you figure out how to handle them, it's just, the big thing is how heavy they are, So.
Do you guys have any information on what's kind of going on with Lake Okeechobee? Because I've seen some of that, and it's sad looking, and
More and more algal blooms and more spraying of herbicides.
yeah, that's kind of what it is, right? They're just they're trying to kill what's around the.
They're trying to
you
kill
would
invasive
know.
water lettuce and hyacinth primarily, but they subcontract to sprayers that get paid based on the amount of spray that they spray. So they go out and they start spraying. They turn on the nozzle and they go. So there's a lot of the clean water movement has been after them for over a decade now, because it's actually illegal to use those herbicides on the water.
So who's paying them? The government then? Florida.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, okay.
I know FWC contracts it all, and that Florida is actually spraying more gallons of several of those herbicides than all the other states combined.
Man, it makes me so sad to see those photos of the algae bloom and
It's horrible.
gators trying to wade through this, and they just,
It's horrible.
man, it's such a sad, because that's our biggest waterway in Florida.
Yeah. And it kills a lot of wildlife every year and a lot of plant life and all that. And, not just the algae, but then the chemicals all sprayed too. It's killing wildlife. It's just, it's a huge problem. And
I've heard some of it is runoff from farms too, is also not helping. But then you're saying that they spray tens of thousands of gallons.
But because we're close to nature, we kind of, all these groups like the Clean Water Movement, they're interested in all of the animals and we're interested in a clean environment. So everybody kind of overlaps a little bit and knows a little bit what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that from someone that maybe really.
Yep, and there's several groups
Really
of fishing
expert on it.
captains that, the type of captain that take people out freshwater fishing, bass fishing primarily. There's a lot of those groups that are forming together to try to document citizen science-wise what they're seeing with regards to the spraying, because the FWC commissioners are developers. And they hear from the FWC biologists, we should spray, they spray. But the people that are out there on the water every day, they're the ones seeing the devastation, the bird's nests that are getting sprayed, the dead fish, the lack of all the inverts and all the other animals that are getting killed by the spray. Yeah,
I'm sure it's ruining even tourism around there and people that want to live around there, and
Sure.
the impact on that alone is huge too, is because if you can get tourism, then you can have funding to kind of clean this stuff and make it good. So tourism I think people always give tourism a bad name, but it can actually help a lot of.
But I think tourists around the world were looking last year and seeing the satellite images of Florida spewing stuff out both sides and red tide blooms everywhere.
Yeah, that too, the red tide stuff.
red tide is devastating. When I started working with wildlife in 2004, I worked at a place called Pelican Man's Bird Sanctuary in the Wildlife Hospital there, and it no longer exists. It's now Save Our Seabird Sanctuary in Sarasota. That's what it turned into. But at the time when I worked in the Wildlife Hospital, we had one of the worst red tide blooms at the time, and we were getting in sometimes 50 birds a day that were dying from red tide poisoning. And then next door is Moat, and our veterinarian worked at Moat as well, and they were getting manatees, dolphins, all these different animals that were dying from the red tide as well. And it's just it's crazy how much damage it does and sets us back. You have all these efforts where they dump money into conservation for certain animals like manatees and stuff like that, and then something like this sets everything back again. So it's definitely a problem that needs to be dealt with.
My
and
worry
looked
is
into deeper.
It always feels like government programs that try to help end up actually hurting, which I always have said about, government
everything.
in general
Yeah.
is when you try, just leave it alone and it'll probably be better.
They have their place, but I think there's you gotta maybe not allow the full impact of the government to do things. It's okay to help out a little bit here, but when they get fully involved like that, sometimes it definitely has a negative impact rather than a positive
And
one.
I think more often the thing that we see that's so difficult is, speaking broadly, a lot of those government groups, they have the power to make the changes, but not necessarily the background to, they might have some researchers on a topic. They don't necessarily act based on what
Science says.
science and the common man out there is seeing.
There's a lot of red tape involved, and then if you
Yeah.
like, this will fix it, and then it's a 10-step program, and you do 5 steps,
Yeah.
and then you're worse off because you only did half of what you should have been doing.
Yep.
We know this very well from dealing with Fish and Wildlife over a lot of exotic species of animals. Now, me as somebody, I was an invasive species first responder for Fish and Wildlife voluntarily for years, and I've worked heavily removing invasive species from the wild, but they have their agenda of what they want to do with exotics in Florida. They want to essentially ban almost every exotic animal as pets here in Florida. And I'm not for that. As somebody who's seen the impact and what devastation it can have, I also believe this is America and people should have a path to some sort of freedom of keeping exotic pets. Now, I'm not against people having licenses to have animals, but don't make it so impossible to get that license that basically only $1 million facility can have that license because they meet all the requirements.
My worry is the word exotic animal can be interpreted differently. You make a rule, no exotic animals. 5 years later, suddenly this animal and this animal are exotic animals, and then suddenly your cat is an exotic animal, and then it's kind of weird when you use very inclusive language.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge problem too, because the reptile community, the bird community, they're kind of separate, and those are mostly exotic animals that people keep, and they don't always talk to each other and get on the same page, or tropical fish as well. That's becoming a problem too. Now they're trying to, go to regulate them as well. And so what we can't get across is over to those cat and dog people and realizing that it won't be long until, they may possibly determine that, they want to start regulating your dogs and cats and stuff like that. Now, Fish and Wildlife doesn't really hold the power for that, but the government does if they want to, possibly USDA. USDA just announced that I have a permit for them for mammals. They inspect for if you have mammals on display, and they just announced they're now getting into birds. If you have a bird at all that's on display at all, you're going to have a license through the USDA if you're exhibiting it to the public or anything like that. And so they're just slowly taking steps towards putting licenses in place and taking away people's freedoms to own some of these animals or to, bring them out in public or talk about them. And so I think some way we need to bridge that gap and get to the people that only keep, the more domesticated animals like dogs and cats, because right now it's just not as mainstream. It's not known as mainstream right now that they're doing this. They're taking slow steps towards that, and we don't want to get to that point.
The small hammer, you chip away at it.
And right now the dog and cat people are looking at it and say, oh, well, you probably shouldn't own a snake, or you shouldn't own a pet iguana or whatever. But wait until it's your pet. I mean, these people that have a pet iguana or a pet snake, they feel just the way you do about your pet dog or cat. And you're saying that it's, you shouldn't have that. But what if somebody came into your house and said, you're not allowed to have this anymore?
That pit bull is probably more dangerous than somebody owning a snake.
Yeah, no, and pit bulls are an example right there. They try to control those in some counties. They don't let people own them and stuff. And yes, their jaw power is strong, but in most cases, it just comes down to bad owners that don't properly, keep their pit bull. Yeah. But, that's one example of right there. They're trying to regulate that in some places that you can't keep this. And then insurance companies say you can't keep this dog at your house, and so
I think a lot of people
slowly
don't
moving in that direction.
Since we're on U.S. Fish and Wildlife and FWC, I think a lot of people don't understand that, certainly when I was a kid, I would have thought that that's who takes care of the wild animals, right? Well, it's not. In the state of Florida, we are a wildlife rescue. We do everything. We don't get any money from the cities that we work with, the counties that we work with, the state, and the state does not take care of the wildlife. So when you have an injured animal that falls out of the sky or you hit with your car, the first thing a lot of people think of is, oh, call FWC. FWC won't respond to that.
They'll refer you to a rescue like ours.
They'll refer the person to us, and then we have to go out. What FWC and U.S. Fish and Wildlife really do is police people like us, and they make stricter and stricter and stricter regulations a lot of which is based on non-stakeholder input. You have people like PETA that are extremely powerful, that are always pushing and pushing and pushing, that would like to see no wildlife rescue in some ways because that's interfering. Or hey, those animals are in too small a cage. We're a wildlife rescue that depends completely on donations. So we don't have a lot of money. We don't have money for the big type of fancy cage you might see in a zoo. We have room for a dog carrier or the finances to build a small cage every now and then. There's always that push, oh, your cages should be bigger. They hear that often enough, suddenly we have to build bigger cages. We don't have the money for that, or we have to put money towards that. That's less money that we can put towards the rescues. And what we try to put all of our money towards is the rescues, towards, when you have an animal with a broken wing, even with just food, for the course of a month or two, it might be a couple $100. And frequently, people that could be donating to us might give us $10 every now and then. That's rough. An animal that we rehab to release always is going to cost us hundreds of dollars. We have the gas to do the rescue, our tools that we're constantly buying, food for those animals.
You're all crowdfunded.
Veterinary bills. And we're lucky, we're really fortunate that we have several good local veterinarians that work with us either on the cheap or do some stuff for free, or we simply couldn't do it.
So FWC wants you to do your job and at the same time make it harder to do your job.
Exactly. That's exactly.
They're playing both sides of this.
I want to say
coin
something
here.
too, because I don't want to talk too badly about FWC, because I actually love a lot of the officers, and my inspectors who come to inspect me are really great guys. And it just comes from the top, and there's decision makers up there, and they have to enforce and do their job. And so I have nothing against the officers. I think they're great. And in many cases, they'll go out and rescue animals for me if I need them to. In some cases, deal with alligators and stuff like that. But it's definitely from the top, the decisions are, being made. And a lot of it has more to do with, political stuff than it does and looking good than it does with pure science and what makes sense. And they're just not taking into consideration, like I said, freedoms, that living here in the United States, we're supposed to be free to a degree. And, I think part of that is being able to be happy owning an exotic animal. And like I said, I'm okay with a path to getting to that, having to have a license or something, but make it, attainable, something that you can actually, the average person can do if they really feel strongly about that. I mean, you got biology teachers and stuff like that who want to keep certain exotic animals to do education and things like that. And they're making it so you have to have strict licensing and bonds and all kinds of stuff to be able to have that animal. And the caging requirements are almost impossible to meet in some cases.
And FWC commissioners are appointed by the governor.
Yeah.
Okay. And in Florida, our FWC commissioners are developers.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's basically like you were saying, good people getting involved in a bad or a somewhat bad organization that doesn't always have the best interests of the wildlife in mind, like we would imagine. Like you're probably the average person sitting there listening to this thinks FWC, they got the best interest of all the wildlife in Florida, and for
there's
the most
politics
part, you guys
involved,
have the
like
best
everything
interest.
else. There's politics involved, and so overall, yes, the officers do amazing work, and they're out there busting people that are poaching. We just saw here in Manatee County taking a lot of sea life, marine life, people that were poaching and things like that. I know a lot of the officers, and they're just awesome guys, and they really care about wildlife and what they're doing. But again, it comes from decision makers up at the very top, and it's caused people like me who are trying to rescue and do good work a lot of trouble to do what I do. I got involved with I got all my licenses for pythons and stuff like that and all these exotic animals because I wanted to rescue them. And then they slowly made it so it was impossible to rescue them. Now your only option is to kill them. And not every case is a kill case. You get let's say somebody brought a pet python in illegally, some really rare one, maybe like some albino or some weird morph of a python. They brought it in the state illegally. It gets loose from their home. I get called to capture it because it's loose, and that's who people call. When I get there, my option now is to kill that python or call Fish and Wildlife so they can come and kill it, even though it's friendly and it's a rare morph that's potentially in the pet trade outside of Florida be worth even thousands of dollars or something. it has to be euthanized. There's no way around it. They will euthanize it every time, and they claim they're going to do studies on it to see what it's been eating in the wild. And it's like, it's a pet that just got loose, and in most cases they find a white rat inside of it because
reptiles get a bum rap too, so they don't really have that recognition as pets by a lot of
they're not the
people.
cute fuzzy animals, so people just don't have that same attachment.
Yeah.
And
they're not going to find an out-of-state dog and just immediately euthanize it.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy though? Because like your neighbor will be anti you having your animal, and like, you know, I may not agree with stuff, but I like to fight for people's right to do it. You know, like,
well, that's it.
We saw a lot of sad stories when they changed the rules on green iguanas. So there were a lot of kids all around, children all around the state that had, you know, that little tiny cute pet iguana, and they live a long time. They grow, and a lot of people, you know, that got a little baby iguana when they were a kid. 30 years later, that iguana lives in their living room.
Yeah.
There was that all over the state of Florida. It's all around the country.
They were seizing. My inspectors had told me they were seizing from little kids. You know,
yeah,
they were
little
taking
kids
little
pulling
kids'
on
pets.
their pants, saying, "No, please don't take my lizard. Please don't take my pet."
They don't want to be doing that. You know,
and
it's
they're
just wrong.
seizing and euthanizing them all.
And I get that iguanas are an issue in certain parts of Florida. They definitely are. But when you look at the impact they have, it's exaggerated heavily. There's salmonella everywhere from iguanas because they poo in the water. Please name me a single case of somebody getting salmonella from an iguana when they swam in the water. I don't know of any.
Yeah.
And then the other ones is they poo in people's swimming pools, they eat people's flowers around their homes, and they sometimes dig next to seawalls. Those are the main complaints of iguanas.
Fall out of trees when it's cold.
Yes, and the Keys, they're everywhere. They're all over the place, and it is a huge problem down there. But when you're talking the rest of Florida, it's not that big of an issue. We do find them in this county along the coastline, but
and they do
there's
make
not
great pets.
there's not an excessive amount of them. Maybe there will be eventually. I don't know, but they don't have the impact of a Burmese python. You know, Burmese python are, you know, eating native wildlife.
Killing machines.
The green iguana, 95% plant life is what it's eating. It's eating flowers, and, you know,
Do they have any predators?
Yeah, I mean, when they're young, birds, everything will eat them. Alligators will eat them when they're adults. Crocodiles in South Florida have been seen eating them before, and even bobcats and stuff like that. So almost anything will eat them.
What about like some exotic birds? Like, how has that been changing? Because I was at a bar once, and it was just down on like Fruitville, and a guy had a parrot that was sitting there chain smoking, and it was smoking cigarettes, hanging out with him, like.
Now that's maybe going a little too far there, but you know, as far as parrots go, now they're changing. Now the guy who just comes down to the bar with his pet parrot, they're probably not going to require a license for that. But somebody who is displaying a parrot to make money off of it or to exhibit it for educational purposes, if you're doing it on a daily basis, they're going to require a license now from USDA. They'll require veterinarian, records, and all this different stuff will be required with it. You'll get inspected twice a year typically. And so all that just to have a parrot on display, which are very commonly sold in the pet trade. And you can privately own one and you don't have to have a license, but the minute you're showing it to the public, you now have to have a license for it. And, you know, I'm not sure that that's really necessary. We already have a license. Technically, if you have a parrot on display, you have to have a license through FWC anyways. And this is another problem. We have U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Florida Fish and Wildlife, and USDA are all inspecting us, and they require different things, and sometimes they contradict each other and don't make any sense, like heights of fences and stuff like that. One says it only has to be this high, the other one has to be this high. And so it's like, how many people do we really need inspecting us? And why can't we consolidate that all into one? Isn't this a huge waste of government money and resources that we have three different organizations inspecting us when one person could do it and we could just hit all those marks? So those are other issues.
They like to waste a little money.
Why not?
Yeah. So tell me about, like, I mean, you already went into it a little bit. Like, you guys obviously run on donations, and if people care about animals and rescuing them, you guys are probably one of many or few people that can actually take donations and directly have impact. Because if you give money to PETA, they're just going to kill some dogs with it. They're not going to really help you that much. But you guys have like an actual direct impact.
I didn't say that, PETA. Don't attack me.
I said it 100% because there's been plenty of stories of that.
No, I agree.
If I could say something to everybody, it would be make donations to the small the small nonprofits around you that are
They
close to
definitely
your
have
heart.
more of an impact.
It makes a huge impact. $100 to the Salvation Army goes towards the CEO's pay, right? $100
cents
to
of
us
it.
goes a long way, right?
It does get directly used. I mean, especially for us, we're a very small not-for-profit. I mean, we started a few years ago. I was the vice president. I still am vice president of the other Wildlife Inc., which is bigger, and they've been open for over 30 years. And, they're still considered small, and we're like tiny next to them. And so, but we're just starting out, and I still work closely with them. And, but those donations go directly for paying for rescue operations of animals and veterinarian bills and things like that, building cages for animals that need homes permanently because they're disabled. But yeah, we survive solely on donations. And as of right now, I don't take a paycheck, and neither does Greg. He's the vice president, I'm the president, and we have some volunteers. Nobody gets paid. I honestly, as we talked about Mixon, I was working there for 13 years. They employed me to do the tours there, but it was my not-for-profit and Wildlife Inc. there. And so the funding I got was through donations from the public to pay for animal care and all that. My paycheck, which was never really that big from there, it ended, last week because they're selling that farm. And so now I don't actually have a job, but I'm still going to work every day taking care of animals, and I'm still rescuing animals every day. And I'm like, okay, how am I going to make this work? So we're hoping I can get to the point where I can start, eventually paying myself to do that. I'm not talking a lot, but to get by. But right now,
live, have a life.
I'm still doing it, and that money is all going back into rescues. And just yesterday I had a snake call and a rescue for a raccoon. I got to do a raccoon right after
And
this interview.
now the farm isn't really like a lot of things locally like that are closing because they're like, oh, we want to put 90 houses on this property. What's the deal with the farm? Is it
So Mixon Fruit Farm, I'll just go through like brief history and where we're at right now. Mixon Fruit Farms has been around for 84 years, and the current owners, which are would be the grandson of the original owners, Dean Mixon and Janet Mixon, they've decided that they want to retire, and more power to them. They have every right to, and they're selling that land, and it's about 40 acres in almost West Bradenton. It's one of the last little farms in West Bradenton, and that's been around forever. And so they want to sell the land, but they don't really want to see it go to developers. They want to see it go to something else because all that land around there is completely developed. Just over the past few years, developers have bought every little piece of land around there, and they're developing it, putting tons of houses in, no yards, just like all houses. And they know, first of all, for them, it's just the memories of the place. They don't want to see it go completely. They would like to have it memorialized some way. And then for me, working out there for 13 years, I've seen all the wildlife that's there, and it's going to be devastating for me to see all these animals that I know are going to lose that space and place to live if they develop there. So developers are knocking at their door, but the county wants to buy that land and turn it in. Well, County Parks wants to buy that land, purchase it, and make it a county park. And they want to turn that 40 acres into biking and walking trails and replant native Florida plant life. They want to keep some of the bamboo and orange trees and all that stuff to kind of, remember Mixon Fruit Farms.
So that's best case scenario.
That's the best case scenario, and that's where they're at right now. They want to do that, but it's next week. I believe it's the 7th or 8th that the commission is voting on, the county commissioners are voting on potentially funding that purchase. They're getting funding from other areas, so the full funding isn't from just the county. It's grants and stuff like that.
City of Bradenton is very
City of
interested in
Bradenton is
assisting
getting
with it,
involved,
and there's
and
grant money that's going toward it that stipulates working with wildlife when we're already there.
Yeah, the
So
grant
it's
money
a
is about
terrifying
conservation.
time. It's terrifying for us, but also we're being really optimistic that it could just be the greatest thing ever.
Could be much better than what it's always
It
been.
could be, yeah, because right now we're kind of small out there. We have been because we've never had a lot of the funds to expand, but with meeting with the county, potentially helping us with finding bigger grants and things like that. They want to keep us there, but we also have to keep in mind that, they can't just choose us because we are not a part of the county. We're a separate not-for-profit. So, they think it makes sense for us to stay there because we're already there. We have all the licenses. We have more wildlife licenses than anybody else in Manatee County. So, and we work closely with the other rescue that would probably really be the only other rescue that could take that. And we told them they can team up with us.
So you guys could get approved, but then still where you get the boot.
So yes, now the park could be purchased by the county.
Yeah.
And they still have to make a decision of whether they're going to actually keep us there or not. And so right now, the parks really want to keep us there, but it still comes down to the commissioners.
So you'll have to give them like a big proposal and all that kind of stuff.
Which we've given them a business plan and shown some drawings of what we would like to do and how we'd like to expand there. And it would be great for the public because it would be a place where the public could come, and see some native and exotic wildlife, and you'd be supporting a wildlife rescue, a true wildlife rescue. We're out on the street every day rescuing injured wildlife, treating them and all that stuff. And so, I don't see the downside to doing that with this county. I mean, we already do this, and we help the county so much by rescuing wildlife. And this is just giving us a place to expand and grow and help us.
One strong point we have is that a lot of people in Manatee County government know who we are, and
we work closely with a lot of the government officials.
A lot of the Bradenton police and most of the sheriffs know Damen and I. I mean, they know that we're the guys that are out there rescuing all of the animals. We just need more and more people in the area to know that we're the guys that are doing it. There's so many people out there that love animals that, they take their families to the state parks, they take their families out bird watching or whatever they're really into, and they don't really realize we've rescued thousands of animals and re-released them. And it gets to the point where after all of the years we've been doing it, I occasionally look up and see something fly by and think, I wonder if I rescued that or its mother or father or grandfather or a great-grandfather took some part in it, right?
Every street I drive by in this county, I've rescued an animal on or in that general area. And I've been here for 20 years, 20 plus, I think. Where are we at? We're coming up on 20. And I mean, Sarasota and Manatee County, but mostly Manatee County. And like everywhere I go, I've rescued an animal there. And so we've had a huge impact on this county over that time, that 20 years. And Wildlife Inc., who we work closely with, and they've rescued so many thousands of animals in this county. And both of us are together, and we want to use this property to continue that and do better.
It's interesting because not too long ago, I was at a county commissioners meeting, the zoning and same deal, and we're fighting for the racetrack because they want to build 4,000 homes on top of the racetrack, which will be an insane development. And the
good luck to the people listening to the drag racing and stuff next to it.
They already don't love it, and we don't have a curfew there right now, but like it's going to eventually happen, and that's a historic facility there. It's been in Bradenton forever.
I'm all for that place, and I know it's loud and all that, but it's just a cool, unique place that you don't see a lot of that anymore. So and it's definitely worth saving and
a lot of people see when they go out to Mixon fruit farms. They see old cages with animals in them. I think some people expect to see a fancy zoo. You go to Zoo Tampa and you see these beautiful enclosures. That's not what we are. Those animals that are on display are ones that we saved, but we couldn't get them quite healthy enough to release. There's a blind owl. There's a bird that has no peripheral vision from getting hit by a car. So it's not as though that it doesn't really showcase the rescues. And because of Florida law, we're really not allowed to showcase rescues. We're not allowed to show people all of these animals that we're rescuing and releasing them out back into the wild, because it's actually illegal now to display any animal that's going to be re-released out into the wild. So regularly, in the past few weeks, I've had a bunch of giant pileated woodpeckers that I was working with to rehab and re-release. We can't do it somewhere where the public can see them.
Can you document it for, say, like YouTube or something?
You can video or take photos. You're just not allowed to let people see in any way, really, which is understandable to some degree, but, some stuff from a distance or, making, ways that they can't see you as well.
But video documentation, like YouTube obviously could pay you and you could document this stuff and kind of follow it along that way, and that could be a way. There's quite a few people on YouTube that do it. South Florida, there's Camp Keenan. He does a lot of
I definitely need to get more into doing that. I post a lot of photos and stuff, on Instagram and Facebook, and I have a YouTube, but I haven't done much there yet. I got to tell you, I'm just overwhelmed with work with animals, and it's really difficult to get. I film stuff all the time, and then I just don't get around to editing it and doing everything. And
it's honestly years of saying we should publish.
Yeah, we should do
videos.
that. I'm sure you hear that all the time.
If you're so busy doing rescues and cleaning cages and things like that, you just don't have the.
I come home and I'm dead every night. I'm like, I get to work, which that's what you got to do, I guess, to make it.
And you climb into bed and you pull the covers up and close your eyes and go, oh, what a day. And the phone rings and somebody says,
I get calls.
I hit a deer.
Yeah. It doesn't fail. Like, as soon as I get home from work, I live in Myakka, somebody calls me from West Bradenton and says, you gotta come to West Bradenton and get this animal. Or right at night when I'm about to go to sleep, I get a snake call or an owl, something like that, and I gotta get back up.
I hope so deep down that they accept and buy this and turn it into a sanctuary.
Because it would be unlike anything else. And around the country there are municipalities and counties that are starting to support wildlife rescue. It's starting to become a thing, and Manatee County has the opportunity to make something that would be really cool and kind of at the forefront of it all, to say, hey, we actually support wildlife rescue. We actually...
It wouldn't just be great for tourism. It would be great as a service to the county for a rescue that, is supported by the county to rescue animals. It's a win-win for everybody. But, I would keep telling everybody, if you want to help in any way, the best thing to do is email the county commissioners and let them know that we want to fund the purchase of that property to turn it into a park. It's 2525 27th Street East in Bradenton, Mixon Fruit Farms. And
I'll put all the information that I can down in the description.
Yeah,
I'll get some emails from you, some ways they can donate, some ways they can help out any way that's possible, because I think
it becomes this dreamy sanctuary or it becomes more houses.
I think that's one of the interesting things. So when I stood in front of the county commissioners, what they did was they constantly bragged about how great this county is. And if you tell them, well, it's not going to be great if it's just homes. It's only going to be great if there's things here
We don't
that
have
make
a lot
it
of
great.
attractions here.
No.
There's not a whole lot going on. When it comes to animals, I keep telling people, like, between like Jungle Gardens and Tampa, I'm the only place that has a crocodile on display and has animals like that. And so, we have this potential great opportunity to have an attraction here, and we just need the support of, the county commissioners to make that
What about
happen.
like Moat Aquarium? They're building that right on University.
They're moving that facility there, and I believe they plan on putting crocodiles there. But it's kind of in line with Jungle Gardens, kind of same distance, and it's going to be a state of the art facility. It'll be amazing,
I'm excited for that as an attraction for children education and all that kind of stuff, and I think they do a good job at displaying it. And I think
they're very educational, and they do a lot of science and research and stuff like that.
Aquariums have come so far.
Yeah,
I think that can really be a cool facility.
Yeah, it's already what they have currently out on the island out there is already amazing. Their otter habitat and stuff like that, and it's a cool place. And I worked hand in hand with them, like I said, the veterinarian from Moat for many years, so I got to hear all the great work that they did. And
can they still visit you guys now? Like, are you still operational?
I'm doing right now booking private tours basically, so you can book with me through our Facebook or email, which I'll be putting out more advertisements for that in the next day or so. But I'm definitely open to doing group tours and things like that. So you can get in touch with us, and we'll help you out and get you out there.
Awesome. You guys got anything else for us? We're pretty close to wrapping up here, but if there's anything else, obviously this was an awesome conversation. I'd love to have you guys on again as we get more information and as things change and evolve. I would, the seats are always open.
No, we should do an update after this all goes down, and also we need to get you out and visit and let you see some animals and play with some dangerous stuff.
Awesome. You guys got any parting words for the people?
Just if you can go to the Manatee County website and check the commissioners, and as Cooper said, he'll put up the information, and just send them an email and support us in getting that property. So at the very least, even if it's not for saving us, it's for saving that land and making sure it doesn't turn into homes. It's beneficial for everybody.
We don't need homes there.
And people can check us out on Facebook with the Wild World Rescue and Sanctuary and see. It's every day pictures of us holding up animals.
Yeah.
We don't go into a lot of description, but it's animal.
You can see all the animals we rescue
and saving.
Yeah, Instagram and Facebook is just at Wild World Rescue, and that's where we show all of our rescues and work.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. I feel educated. I feel like we definitely got a lot of good information out to the people. And like I said, guys, I hope to have you guys on again. If you guys have any questions directly for them, put them in the comments and we can hope to answer them either next time or maybe you guys will hop in the comments or something. But guys, thank you so much for coming. That'll do it.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.